Feeling blue?
Good.
Good.
Good. We are called to create an even better and more just world.
And this is Creighton's response.
Reach out beyond boundaries.
And differences.
To serve those with needs.
Greater than our own.
This is Creighton.
This is Creighton.
This is Creighton in the community.
Hello and welcome to Creighton in the Community. My name is Joyce Bunger and I'll be your host. Recently, Creighton University Center for Health Policy and Ethics and School of Nursing produced a documentary called Ethics in Nursing, the Foundation of the Profession. Today we're going to learn more about that documentary and visit with the woman who helped inspire the project. I'm here with Dr. Winifred Ellen Child Pinch, Professor Emerita from the School of Nursing, as well as the Center for Health Policy and Ethics. What inspired this project?
Well, Dr. Amy Hatta and I had always wanted to do an ethics, a nursing ethics project, and there were so many individuals who were experts in this area that we wanted to bring together. And so after much discussion and deliberation, we decided that we would plan an ethics seminar and invite these individuals to Omaha for a discussion and a debate about their ideas. And while they were here for this working seminar, which did result in a book, we decided that we ought to interview these. This was such a unique opportunity to have all of these individuals in one place at one time. And although they knew of each other's work, they had never all been gathered in one place together.
And now, stay with us as we listen to the words and the thoughts of 28 trailblazers in nursing ethics.
My start in nursing is probably a bit unusual. I was a member of the Sisters of the Holy Family of Nazareth, and I wanted to be a French teacher. And when they asked us what we wanted to do, I said I wanted to teach French, and they said, how about nursing? And at a time when nobody spoke back, I said I had better choose nursing. And it was a match made in heaven.
If you're the firstborn Catholic girl in the 60s, what do you do besides be a teacher and a nurse? And although my father had been to the university, there weren't a lot of role models at the time. So I am passionately committed to the work of nursing and those who do it.
Well, at the time that I started to formally study ethics, this had to be 1978. My challenge was, once I was admitted into a doctoral program in philosophy with a focus on biomedical ethics, was to be taken seriously.
I grew up in the Second World War. I was 10 years old and 2 days when the United States went to the Second World War. When I first went into psych nursing, they hadn't developed the psychotropic drugs. And there was a lot of electric shock and a lot of admitting patients involuntarily. I witnessed clinically a lot of things that led me to ask questions. Why are we doing this? Should we be doing this? That was a real turning point for me. I had been interested in sort of a vague, generalized way, but then I really focused in on ethics and it became my career.
And seeing the effects of poverty on people and why this had to be, seeing children die because we couldn't even get a shot of penicillin for them. This was before Medicare or Medicaid. It was a rude awakening. That certainly was one of the things that led me to study ethics. Also, other things that I saw in the hospital and so on. I didn't understand why things should be that way. So I started going to one of the very few ethics seminars that was available at the time was from the Hastings Center. And I went to their seminars, which were all focused on death and dying at the time, and I thought, good Lord, I'm much more worried about the living at the moment.
I think like most nurses, I thought I was going to just take care of patients all my life. You know? And then I did that and loved it. It was the 1950s, 1957. I began nursing school, and that was a very conventional kind of social time, you know, that before the feminist movement, et cetera, and people didn't question, and above all nurses. And so you were very subservient and obedient.
I thought all you had to do to be a good nurse was to read doctor's orders. And sorry to say, I'm not sure we've come that far.
Nurses perceived that doctors, you know, would somehow gain retribution or scream at them or yell at them or whatever. People that I would work with would see injustices and being done to patients and treated shabbily or whatever, and they wouldn't speak up, you know, to doctors or to the hospital administration about the conditions or whatever, because they were afraid to speak up, and I just didn't quite understand that. And so that got me into my research in the doctoral program of really looking at nurses and studying their ethical reasoning and why they make certain choices.
I was working on a floor that was a surgical oncology floor, so we saw a lot of patients that were people who had cancer. We'd have discussions about end-of-life issues, end-of-life decision-making, but those were the days when physicians felt like you had to protect patients from the truth. In one case, a woman knew clearly what she wanted at the end of life. There was no advance directive at the time. She didn't have orders written that were consistent with her wishes. We had the physician come in to talk to her, and he got upset that I had brought these issues up. She, in the meantime, tried writing her wishes out on a napkin to, you know, do you think this would be good enough? Which I thought was really ridiculous, that you get to the point of having people be worried that they're not going to have their wishes followed.
I really thought I would stay at the bedside. It was the way patients were being treated that really bothered me. The kinds of decisions that were sort of being made for people rather than with people. There was something about where I was and my values that said this was not where I needed to stay unless I could make a change.
We analyzed audio tapes of physicians and neonatal nurse practitioners talking to parents about their extremely premature infants' medical condition, treatment options, and the prognoses. And those conversations were so inadequate from my perspective and so adequate from the perspective of the healthcare providers.
I turned my attention to ethics because I saw so many instances when healthcare wasn't working for people who needed it. A dear friend who at the age of 39 was diagnosed with advanced ovarian cancer and spent 2 of the hardest years of dying that I've ever witnessed. She looked like a Holocaust victim when she died. She had intestinal obstructions, she had surgery, she was in and out of the hospital. I can remember just spending an hour sitting behind her physically to give her strength while she retched over an amethyst basin. And she said, "Carol, please tell your students, when I first got sick, it didn't matter how people treated me because I knew who I was." She was president of a college. She had a PhD in biology. She was from Worcester, Massachusetts, had that delightful sense of New England privacy and reserve. She was one of the most gentle, loving human beings I've ever had the good grace and fortune to know. She said, "As I've grown weaker, I become whomever people make me." And she said, if a nurse or a doctor walks into my room and moves me like meat, I become meat. And I wanted to cry that I remember my profession had the capacity to take a Lillian and transform her to a slab of meat on a platter.
You can't pay me to care about you. You can't pay me to be compassionate. I have to want to do that. So you can pay me to provide services to you, but whether I smile, whether I touch gently, whether I embrace your needs, has to come from me. And so I think one of the greatest things that has to happen in our system is for individuals, person by person, taking responsibility for what it means to truly care about another person. Not for them, about them. That's what it means to be an ethical being. I think the greatest surprise for me in my journey in ethics and in human rights has been my own limitations. My own culturally induced views of what the world was like. To come to realize that my colleagues in resource-poor nations are not disadvantaged when it comes to brain power. They're only disadvantaged when it comes to trying to do the impossible with nothing. And so what I had to do is to step back and say, wow, what I can learn from these people who are resource poor, but spiritually and intellectually rich, and probably challenged and more accustomed to doing the impossible with next to nothing than I ever was living in a resource-rich nation.
I think part of the difficulty for me has been that I see nursing as such a rich, powerful profession, and yet many of my colleagues don't.
Nurses need to be more empowered in healthcare environments to be able to make judgments and to practice the way they are taught in nursing school. There are too many distractions, too many other powerful players who are concerned with money, who are concerned with power, that gets in the way of the nurse really being able to practice according to the tenets of their judgment.
I really see that we need to change our environment so that, you know, medical, nursing staff, healthcare staff can be supported. That you build this into the notion of a plan of care, that there are sit-down appointments. Have you ever had a sit-down appointment with a physician when you've got a loved one in an intensive care unit? Duh. Does not happen because the institutions don't value that.
Very little, if anything, obscures a physician from acting in an ethical manner. They are viewed as essentially autonomous, fairly free to make decisions they believe to be right. And I can't see an obstruction there. When it comes to nurses, there are so many obstructions. But I would say the chief one is probably an inherent belief that you can't do something, or you can't make a difference.
I think what's surprising and a little bit disappointing is that some of the same issues that I was struggling with 20 years ago are still here. Who's in charge? Who has the authority to make decisions? Those issues are still with us.
We have to be willing to look at hierarchies of power and privilege, how responsibilities are distributed between and among groups, who has the power to deflect their responsibilities, who must accept them, what are the moral costs in terms of one's integrity, network of relationships, values. And I think there has to be a discussion that says we need a fairer distribution of these than there has been to date. And I'm not too optimistic at the moment.
We've talked about teamwork ever since I was a student. So I graduated with my beginning degree in 1975. And at that time, we talked so much about working as a team. And I don't think we've still done it. And I don't know that that's ever going to happen unless there is genuine, and I'm going to emphasize that word, genuine respect for each other's contributions to what the team needs to accomplish in mutually agreeable goals of care. You have to know what everybody else's job is so that you can do your own. And I think that's where we lack a lot of insight, is into what others really contribute to the team. Nurses are not the only people on the team who really care for the patient. It's not fair for us to act like we're the only ones who do that.
Hospitals and institutions exist because there is a patient who has a healthcare need. So the patient has to be center. So if we have a different environment where the nurse and the physician are respected members of the healthcare team, and we put the patient first, we really put the patient first, we would all be part of a team that would be helping the patient. And nurses would be respected as essential members of the healthcare team.
Using things like the standards for a healthy work environment and actually implementing them and holding people accountable for that. And then creating policies and support systems and structures that will actually support nurses most fully, so that they can take what they know within themselves and trust it and be able to stand firm on it and speak on behalf of patients and families and the profession with strong voice and clear voice.
In some areas we've made pretty good strides with physicians. That was the first big problem. But I think just relationships with other healthcare professionals and the system itself, and in this day and age with HMOs and insurance calling the shots, and it makes nursing very difficult.
I think in small ways it is being done in areas, in departments, in units where good teams are working together to make changes. But the broad situation is not good news.
Almost everyone I met really wanted to do the right thing. The problem is most of our choices deal with a choice between equally unfavorable alternatives. That's the nicest way to say it. Or you can say a wrong and a wrong, so which is the lesser wrong? No matter what you do, things aren't going to turn out the way you hope they will.
It's not being able to care for people the way you know they ought to be cared for. And that's so generalizable. It's what most nurses today are saying. The reason why some nurses come out of nursing.
Issues like serving as the patient's advocate become meaningless in an environment in which there's no time to talk with patients and there's no opportunity to get to know patients in any depth whatsoever.
I may not have much time to spend with you, but if I spend that time focused on you, listening to you, observing, I can do a lot. If I spend that time talking to a colleague, distracted with my own thoughts, then I've cheated you. People think about the issues. Where are you on abortion? Where are you on euthanasia? Well, actually, those are our own opinions, probably well-informed ones, but opinions. But when it comes to what is my obligation to you, then we're talking the ethics of a profession.
Many of you know Creighton University Medical Center is an outstanding hospital, but there's more to it than that. For instance, we're only one of 12 hospitals in the country accredited to perform transfusion-free open-heart surgeries. We see patients from all over the world who come to Creighton for our highly specialized cancer surgery. We also conduct world-renowned research. In fact, Creighton doctors discovered the link between calcium and osteoporosis. We're home to one of Nebraska's busiest trauma centers, with critically injured patients flown here from across the region. In short, we care for some of the area's sickest patients and most complex injuries, all while conducting groundbreaking research and teaching the next generation of medical professionals. So it's easy to see why people say we're more than just a hospital. We're Creighton University Medical Center.
When you go to class at Creighton's College of Business, you will not be taught by a graduate student, but by a real professor. Our faculty members have received Fulbright fellowships, been named scholars in residence at the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Congressional Budget Office, and many sit on the boards and act as consultants for Fortune 500 companies. The bottom line, they bring a wealth of applied knowledge to their areas of expertise, and many are regularly quoted in Business Week, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. This kind of real-world experience is highly prized in the College of Business. We take it so seriously that each semester, through our Real Returns program, over 100 business professionals join Creighton students in the classroom as guest professors.
What needs to develop more in healthcare is a greater emphasis or greater weight upon what I call the meaning and value structures of healthcare, as opposed to the power structures, which include all of the economics of healthcare, which overwhelm, I think, some of the value concerns we have. I'd like to regain and reclaim the patient as the center, and not just the patient, but the whole person. Patient as the center of healthcare, so that patients aren't cattle in the chute, and patients aren't suffering from enormous disparities in healthcare, and patients aren't the 3-minute in the office visit, that sort of thing, so that we reclaim relationships within healthcare, and that persons are treated as persons.
America right now does not have a value, an ethics value, that allows us to really move conversations forward. And it's a value that's all through Europe. It's all through most cultures in the world. We are the only industrialized nation in the world that does not have universal health care, save one, South Africa. And the value that is missing is a value that is oftentimes called solidarity. How is it that we in America, we have no value where I would say, it harms me that you don't have it as good as I do? And that's the value missing in America.
I definitely think that our healthcare system is extremely broken, and I think that we won't really move toward a fairer or more just healthcare system until we address healthcare access issues and healthcare rationing head-on.
I was at the Carter Institute, and one of their reports was on worldwide AIDS. Money is not the question, because what we spend on the war in Iraq in 2 weeks would pay for worldwide health care of every single individual with AIDS. It's so incredible.
We are burying our heads in the sand when we address issues of cost. We think that it should have nothing to do with healthcare decisions at the bedside. That's a luxury. We spend, more than twice what the other industrialized countries spend per person on healthcare. We have poorer outcomes, and we're rationing all the time.
And of course, we ration by the fact that how many percentage don't have access to health care. They don't have any health insurance. That's a type of rationing. And people, I think, have been sold a bill of goods about, well, we won't have any choices. Well, that's nonsense. Of course you have choices. The system is so sick in this country. I mean, I feel like I've stepped back into the dark ages.
I have a fundamental concern around people making money off of people's suffering. I've always had a problem with that, always had a problem. I mean, that's what at least some parts of healthcare are about, is treating, helping, supporting suffering people. And I think that as a society, there's a fundamental problem with making money on people's suffering.
I think that we're selfish, and we need to look beyond. And I think it's the role of ethics to promote looking beyond.
My most difficult challenge is my passion for the next generation of nurses, because it's brutal out there, and I'm furious with academic nursing. I think we have really let students down in many, many ways.
As an educator, do you teach the way you believe nurses ought to be taught and learn, or do you teach them for the situations they're going to get into, meaning the system? And of course, none of us wants to choose the latter.
I think one of the challenges that I found is trying to impress upon others how important ethics is in a nursing curriculum. I truly believe that ethics should be taught as an interdisciplinary course. I think a lot of the ethics issues that nurses face today are because we can't communicate well. We think we do, we try our best, but it doesn't work.
Genuine respect will only come if we start knowing more about what everybody contributes. And that probably means, unfortunately, that we reconfigure the way that we educate health science students. Because it's too late when you get into the clinical setting to try and figure out what everybody else is doing.
I thought it might be easier to go back to the start, to educate nursing students and train them right, not have to, try to get them to change their ways later on in life. And so that led me into the academic world.
I knew every spring that we graduated students who were intelligent enough to pass the licensing exam and clever enough to get through a clinical rotation. But once they were out without supervision, I wouldn't necessarily trust them to be who patients and families needed. And that was the old can virtue be taught question. And I thought there's got to be a better way to graduate not only a clinically competent healthcare professional, but somebody who was not only compassionate, but accountable, responsible.
Ethics is so integrally woven into the practice of nursing that I don't like to see it treated as something separate and special. It should be part and parcel of the education. Everything, in my view, is guided by ethical consideration.
My ongoing challenge is the work in the world with women and human rights. And that is to realize that 99% of the world views women and children as discardable, as objects, as people who shouldn't have voices, who should be kept silent, who should be seen and not heard, and how difficult it is throughout the world to change that view. Starting with the women themselves, because very often we contribute to that view. We acquiesce. We try not to rock the boat, and yet, from a moral perspective, I want to be treated as a human being. And if I want to be treated as a human being, and as I teach my students the same, if you want to be treated as a human being with full human rights, then you have to demand those rights, and you have to act as if you deserve those rights.
Nursing has not invested in ethics scholars, but they want people at the ethics table. So the biggest challenge I've had is to help my nursing colleagues to see that if we want people at the table, that means we have to honor the work they do in ethics. They need to be ethics researchers. They need to teach ethics. They need to write in ethics. They need their work and their scholarship to be in ethics. And then they don't have to ask for a place at the table. They're invited to the table.
I hope you enjoyed the documentary. If you would like more information about this project, I invite you to go to Creighton University's Center for Health Policy and Ethics website. On behalf of all of us at Creighton University, thanks for listening.